March 31st, 1943. Above Pianmana, Burma, 10:42 a.m. Wind roars. The sky trembles with fire. A B-24 tumbles, coughing smoke. It's broken, bruised. It falls in pieces. White flowers bloom below the wreck. Parachutes. Men dangling like seeds on the wind. One chute drifts alone. A young face, eyes wide, hands trembling. A pistol clutched tight. He hears the engine before he sees it. The Zero screams in, wings flashing, sun on metal. A shark closing on a wounded swimmer. He goes limp, he plays dead. The Zero drops lower, closer. Its canopy glints, its nose rises to line up the shot. He lifts the pistol, quietly. This is crazy. This is instinct. Breath in, sight the glass, squeeze. 4 shots, not a burst. 4 clean, angry cracks. The fighter shivers, it wobbles, it lifts, it collapses. The pilot's head snaps forward. The aircraft rolls, catches air, and slides into the jungle like a blade into grass. For a moment, there is no sound, only wind. Only a soft, stunned silence. Cut to black. This is a story that sounds like a movie. It isn't. It's one of those wartime moments so unlikely, so sharp-edged, that it feels like legend. And yet it lives in official histories, in mess hall whispers, and in the careful footnotes of the few who were there. It begins with a farm boy and a pistol. It ends with a question that has no comfortable answer. He was born far from Burma's jungle. Owen John Baggett. Graham, Texas. He grew up with red dirt in his shoes and open sky above his head. In the house it was quiet, composed, outside the noise of wind and cows and chores. He learned to keep rhythm, with a hay bale, with a dance hall band, with the weather which doesn't care about plans. He was a good shot because you had to be. Farm life made no room for waste. If you missed the first time, the rabbit didn't wait around for a second. He loved music too, the saxophone, the swing bands. He studied, he worked. He watched a world bigger than his county roll past in newspapers and newsreels. Europe, China, a new kind of war, learning a new kind of speed. When Pearl Harbor happened, he didn't ask why, he asked when. In the Army Air Corps, they put him in classrooms, aerodynamics, engines, maps. And then in the air, big heavy aircraft, multiplied risks, multiplied responsibility. He learned to trust instruments. He learned to study the sky like a map you fold over your own fear. They gave him the 4-engined brute called the B-24 Liberator. Fast for its size, thin wings, long range, beautiful from a distance, unforgiving up close. Crews loved it. Crews cursed it. The Liberator could carry a town's worth of explosives and keep flying when logic said otherwise. Baggett flew with the 7th Bomb Group, operating out of India. The missions went east, over jungle, over mountains, toward Burma, toward rail yards, bridges, and airfields feeding the Japanese war machine in Southeast Asia. These were ambitious flights, long, without escort for much of the way, the kind that turned maps into hunger and sweat, and down there too waited a different kind of hunter. We call it a Zero. That's the name that stuck. In truth, in Burma, the fighter that most often pounced on Allied bombers wasn't the Zero at all. It was the Ki-43 Hayabusa. The Allied code name was Oscar. It was a Japanese Army fighter, not Navy. But to the men under canopy, to the crews in the gun turrets, almost any single-engine Japanese fighter was a Zero. This is our first revelation. The myth wrote itself in a single word, Zero. Fast, light, lethal. A symbol rather than a specification. In 1943, whether it was a Zero or an Oscar, here's what mattered. It was built for speed and agility. It could climb like an elevator. It could slice into a bomber stream and leave with the sun. The B-24's scattered defensive fire, thrilling on paper, turned flimsy when a veteran pilot knifed in from a blind quarter, firing point blank, rolling inverted, and gone. March 31st, 1943. The target is the rail yard at Pianmana. Supplies snake along these tracks to feed Japanese divisions. The B-24s lumber off from bases in eastern India. The air is already hot. Propellers bite into morning haze. The crews are quiet. A kind of quiet that sounds like concentration. Baggett is co-piloting his Liberator. The crew knows the checklist. They could do it in the dark. Fly, navigate, bomb, return. It's the return that will be complicated. Anti-aircraft fire greets them. It does not miss. It doesn't need to hit the plane to hit the crew. Flak shreds air first, then it finds metal, flesh. The Liberator takes damage. Then come the fighters. They arrive where the oxygen is thin and the choices are few. One pass, another. Bullets rip through the fuselage. Something cracks. Something is on fire. The order comes fast. Bail out. The fall is long. There is time to think. There is time to feel nothing. A parachute is a cradle you don't trust. We'll pause the scene just before the impossible, because there's something we must say plainly. Revelation 2. This story lives in two worlds. In one, Baggett did the kind of thing Hollywood trades in. He shot a fighter pilot out of the sky with a pistol while parachuting. In the other, historians urge caution. Records are sparse. The Japanese plane may have crashed for reasons no pistol could explain. An American colonel would later claim a Japanese base commander confirmed the death by handgun, but the colonel died on a torpedoed transport. Testimony was cut off by salt water and a war without mercy. The point is this: the improbable sometimes happens, and sometimes it's the story we tell to make sense of the impossible. Picture the geometry. The Japanese fighter sets up a pass, likely at a few hundred feet. The pilot is aiming not to scare but to finish the job. Strafing downed airmen happened. Not always, not never. This is war. Rules are elastic when you believe your cause is absolute. Baggett lets his arms hang loose. He plays dead. The fighter comes lower, closer. The pilot peeks over the nose to confirm. That's the moment. That's the tiny window when a pistol could matter. He lifts the M1911. It's heavy from sweat. It's ordinary, a .45 caliber slab of American steel that served as a sidearm for an entire generation. What can a handgun do to a warplane? Let's talk physics. The .45 ACP throws a 230-grain bullet at around 830 feet per second from the muzzle. Lethal within 50 yards. Accurate, well, it depends on your hands, your heart, your breathing, and whether you're falling through the sky. Against aluminum and plexiglass, at spitting distance, it will punch through. Against a skull, if the shot is true and the gods are looking the other way, it will do what it was made to do. You don't need to pierce a radial engine. You don't need to shred a wing. You need to reach the man who is the brain of the machine. He squeezes. 4 rounds. The canopy glass is the only metric. It breaks, or it doesn't. The fighter wobbles, or it just looks that way. The eyes behind that glass widen, or they never see it coming. Then, the plane dips a wing, cartwheels into green, and disappears. The worst day to fly a Zero ends on the ground for Baggett. He is found, captured. He becomes a different kind of survivor. The next chapters are quieter. They hurt in different ways. He is marched, interrogated, processed. At some point, Singapore, Changi prison. The walls remember more than they will ever say. Bones press against skin, lice. The particular exhaustion of being counted and recounted by men in uniforms who do not want to know you. Food is a rumor. Disease is the wallpaper. He does what farm boys do. He endures. Later, a rumor reaches the POW barracks. A Japanese officer, polished and remote, mentions something in passing. One of his pilots failed to return from a mission. His plane was found in the jungle nearby. The pilot had been shot through the head. The only enemy in the sky at that moment had no aircraft under him. Believe it. Don't. It's not our job to force the truth. It's our job to lay it out, examine the edges, and see what it reveals about courage, accident, and the thin places where they meet. Old the shot have been made? Yes. If the fighter came low, if the pilot got close, if the angle let the pistol find the canopy, if the shooter understood that the lid in this case was not unlike a pheasant exploding from cover, off angle, fast and wicked. Farm lessons translate. Wind is wind. Timing is timing. Could it have been a stall? A sudden gust? A momentary distraction? Also, yes. In a war that made a mess of certainty, both the miraculous and the mundane sat close together. And they still do. Revelation 3. The plane we keep calling a Zero was very possibly not a Zero. It was likely a Nakajima Ki 43 Oscar. The Oscar was the Army's thoroughbred, light, nimble. The Zero, formerly the Mitsubishi A6M, was the Navy's. In Europe, pilots often misnamed German planes too. In the Pacific, the Zero became a catch-all shorthand for the fast, nimble, thin-skinned fighters that chewed on bombers. Words simplify so we can carry them in our pockets. And yet, the Zero deserves its own reckoning, because there would come a day when it was genuinely the worst day to fly one. In 1941 and 1942, the Zero could almost fly in your dreams. It shot down overmatched, undertrained opponents across the Pacific. It chased myths as easily as it chased tail numbers. It was the reason some Allied pilots learned to dive out of combat and never turn with a Japanese fighter. It had range, agility, and pilots with thousands of hours. But wars turn, slowly at first, then all at once. In hangars in San Diego and Pensacola, young American pilots learned a trick. Actually, a handful of them. High-side gunnery passes, energy fighting, the thock weave, the dance that let two wildcats claw back the initiative from a more agile opponent. The boom and zoom, vertical fighting the Zero was too fragile to sustain. American aircraft matured. F-4U Corsair, F-6F Hellcat, self-sealing tanks, armor behind the pilot, 650 caliber Brownings that spat fire across longer distances. The zero-sum math of airframes silently shifted, and the Japanese pilot corps, once the envy of the skies, thinned. Training was shortened, experience drained away into the sea. June 19, 1944, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The worst day to fly a Zero. American radar saw them coming. American discipline held fire until there was no chance to turn back. The Hellcats rose, a blue wall, a generation of farm boys and city kids who had learned to shoot on the move. They didn't turn with the Zero. They cut it to ribbons. The Japanese lost hundreds of planes that day. Some say 300, some more. American losses were in the dozens. The arithmetic was lopsided. The sky did not forgive old myths. It wasn't just the machines. It was the math of men. A pilot like Alexander Vraciu climbed to meet the enemy and in 8 minutes turned 6 diving attackers into 6 columns of smoke. A pilot like Cecil Harris, who grew up on the prairies of South Dakota, finished the war as the second highest scoring Navy ace. A pilot like Joe Foss, South Dakota again, farm kid, wildcat pilot, learned deflection shooting over Guadalcanal because he had to. They calculated lead the way they'd learned to swing through a bird on the wing. They pulled the trigger not where the enemy was, but where he would be. We call shots like that impossible because we mostly see them after the fact, frozen in film. In motion, in combat, the impossible is a practiced habit wrapped in adrenaline. Revelation 4. Impossible is code for unlikely, for a shot that requires not just skill but a stack of small cooperations, the light, the wind, the nerve, the refusal to panic. On a farm, you learn patience. In the air, patience becomes timing. On a parachute, timing is all you have left. We've always named our wars in ways that fit on a plaque. This story doesn't. It lives in a moment when a human being got tired of being hunted and improvised a plan that made sense only to him, right then, with death very close. Baggett's war didn't end in the jungle. It stretched across years of captivity. He survived. He came home. He didn't write a book. He didn't tour air shows. He put the saxophone to his lips again. He lived a life the way most of us hope to, quiet, ordinary, productive, full of small joys and the kind of work that belongs to no one but you. And the story of the shot? It lived without him. It grew legs. It found a place in the oral history of the Pacific War. It leapt from one simple telling to another more embellished. It got called the impossible shot. We're tempted to correct the record with a loud voice, to say the plane was an Oscar, to say the ballistics do not favor a handheld pistol at altitude, to say the POW testimony is thin, and all of that is true. But so is this. Men like Owen Baggett did improbable things and then lived with the memory in a world that did not ask them to prove anything. The M1911 was not designed to kill airplanes, but it was designed for moments you cannot plan. It was a friend in a crisis, and sometimes that is enough. Think of the fighter pilot who dove on a parachute that morning in Burma. He woke up a hero in his own story. He trained hard. He flew well. He cut a bomber out of the sky and then went looking for the human inside it. Maybe he thought of the men who had strafed his comrades just days before. Maybe he thought of nothing but the line of the sight and the feel of the trigger. Maybe he believed he was taking one more piece off the board. He got close. He could see the white of a face, and then the face lifted a pistol. There are no photos, no gun camera film, no clean archival clipping with a serif font. There is only a story, consistent across time, told by people who had no reason to make a farm boy bigger than he already was. The war in Burma was a grinder. Allied campaigns against rail yards like Pyinmana were designed to starve a vast, complex machine. They worked slowly. Supply lines bent and snapped. The Japanese held Burma until 1944. It cost them everything they had left and everything they couldn't afford to lose. American bomber crews learned to fly around weather that has its own moods. They learned to fight their way home when home was still hours away. They memorized the color of the jungle, because they saw it under them more often than they saw their own bases. We remember battles. The labels are neat: Midway, Guadalcanal, the Philippine Sea. But from the air, war is a string of missions that go until they don't. It's a rhythm. Take off, climb, bomb, survive, repair, repeat. The gaps are for eating, sleeping, and writing letters you keep short because you have learned that life changes between one sentence and the next. Revelation 5, the day the Zero died wasn't a day at all. It was a process, a slow learning, tactics, tech, training, better fuels, better radar, better radios, better ways of reminding young men that fear and discipline can share the same cockpit. The Japanese lost the stun of surprise. The Americans built a machine that turned farm boys into aviators and then made them into teachers for the next wave. The Zero's worst day had a number: June 19th, 1944. But if you trace back through the months, you see it coming, like a fighter rolling inverted to begin a diving pass, lines intersecting, stories converging, an old champion meeting a new tempo. And yet, a year earlier, over Burma, a farm boy falling through the sky wrote his own brief, brutal chapter in the long unwriting of the Zero's myth. Dear Mother, the days run together, but the mornings are still good. The sun is bright here. Everything is green like the field behind the house after rain. When I get back, we'll fix the fence at the north end. The post by the old well is loose again. Don't worry about me. Tell Dad to take it easy. The letter was never sent. Or maybe it was. Maybe it arrived months late and smelled faintly of mildew and aviation fuel. War keeps its own schedule. Deflection shooting. The impossible shot that's actually a problem you can solve. You learn to see not the airplane, but the rectangle of space it will fly through in 1 second. You learn the angle. You learn your guns,